Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tech Guy off the radio live stream, our No Frills podcast. We welcome you from the palatial, the Tech Guy off the radio den with its distinct uh, background covering. Sometime next year, we may be coming from a different location. I don't mean a different place other than my house, but my youngest is moving out, and there's been talk of turning his bedroom into a work area and studio. So where I might do both my live radio show, well, not my live radio show, my taped radio show for WQPH and this, but we haven't decided yet. So that may or may not be coming. But either way, I'm very delighted that you cared to join us for a shortened version of the Tech Guy 11 a.m. Trump Economy Edition. And the 11 a.m. podcast on Friday is always the Trump Economy Edition because the reason why we'll do a podcast at 11 a.m. rather than our normal 3 p.m. is that I have to work at my day job, or I should say evening job, since I work till midnight. And in fairness, this is Black Friday, which is probably the busiest day at the place where I work. So I probably shouldn't call this a Trump Economy Edition. At least I wouldn't, except for that there was work yesterday. I didn't. It was voluntary. And I will be on for the next 8 days in a row. So it's going to be a very, very busy time here. And in addition to being on 8 days in a row, we're going to be on for extra hours. And normally this time of year is always very busy. I missed it last year because I had busted my shoulder. And normally, as I said in previous podcasts, we have maybe 20 or 30 hours before Black Friday. But we've been flat out all month. And it's the Trump economy kicking in. And the Trump economy, if Joe Biden ends up winning in the end, the Trump economy is something that especially blue state governors who were using it to produce tax revenues will very much miss. But let's not go with that yet. Let's talk a little bit about what we've seen so far. And I think there's been a lot of tells in what we've seen concerning the election fraud and so forth. The first tell has been, of course, the censorship. As you may or may not know, I was locked out of Twitter a sixth time this week for tweeting out benefits law. And after that lockout, normally previous lockouts, I had always appealed after 12 hours. And with anywhere between 60 seconds and a day, my appeal would be upheld. I would be apologized for. It's totally terrible that we locked you out, which awful sorry about that. It was our mistake. And then I would promptly be locked out again for tweeting out the same link. This time, they actually took 4 days before they let me back in, possibly because I pointed out during my appeal that, yes, I'm going to do not only am I not going to delete the tweet, I'm going to just tweet this out again and have you lock me out again and appeal again and win again, because it's gotten so blatant that it's ridiculous. And the sign of how blatant it is, we had a lot of this. One of the things interesting this week is we had an awful lot of criticism of Sidney Powell, because, we haven't seen any evidence from Sidney Powell. We haven't seen any kind of thing from Sidney Powell. I mean, there's all talk from Sidney Powell. We haven't seen any of these suits. We keep hearing that there's all this evidence, but where's the suits? Where's all of this stuff? Well, Thanksgiving morning, she dropped the suits, or released the Kraken, as people say. And there were suits in Georgia and there were suits in Michigan. And there are two very, very interesting things about these suits. Well, three, actually. And I'm going to get to the Giuliani hearing in a second. But the first interesting thing about these suits is that, as before, we've seen censorship. At first, you saw warning labels from Twitter saying, "Oh, this is disputed." Blah, 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 blah. It's a lawsuit. By that definition, every lawsuit that comes out should have that label, because every lawsuit involves a dispute. So naturally, there's going to be dispute. So I don't know if links to, I mean, we actually had links to the pleas labeled as with Twitter warnings, which is rather ridiculous to begin with. Because, like I said, every suit should have such a label from Twitter if that's the case. Well, then they went to the point. The next thing we saw from our friends on the left, and if you're wondering why I'm hesitating a little bit, it's because I'm trying to type at the same time to tweet out a little bit more concerning the podcast and so forth. Well, then we saw literally the censorship of her site. Twitter would not allow links to her site so people could read the case. Now, again, I mean, this is something very, very large. The idea that you are not going to allow people, this is terrible. We cannot let people see what this suit is. Think about that for a second. Think about it for a second. That Twitter has reached the point where they will not allow people to see, these suits. Now, granted, there are ways around it. I took the 2 suits, put them on my site, and tweeted that out. But it should not reach that point. And again, think about what that means. But that's the second thing they did. The third thing we saw from the left concerning this, I found very amusing. It's that they did a lot of criticism about spelling. Now, I must confess this, and I'm going to mention this right off because this is, if anyone who knows my academic record knows me or knows anything about me, I am the self-confessed worst speller in the Western world. So I certainly have no business criticizing anyone's spelling, and I am very sympathetic to those of us who are spelling challenged. But I want you to think a little bit about what all the critique about the spelling is. And it's we can't, this is ridiculous. We're not even going to talk about this. The spelling there's all these spelling errors. Think about what Sidney Powell had to do. She had to gather the evidence, put it all together, keep as much of it as possible from the left before she gets it out there, because people have been threatened. People have been, the fact that we have seen so many people have to literally back out or go into hiding over this. I mean, in fact, the guy who released Joe Biden's laptop is now in hiding because of the threats, which is in America. This is what's happening in America right now, which is so amazing, so disgusting, frankly, that if you told me that we would be seeing this at this point, or at any point, you told me I would be seeing this in America, I wouldn't have believed you. I just plain wouldn't have believed you. But so you're trying to get this all together as quick as you can, grabbing all this evidence and putting together a case in time. Because remember, there's a question of how much time do we have to get this stuff out there? Because you have to not only have the case, you have to file the case in time to reach the deadlines before certification and so forth. You have to this case has to go in with enough time for the courts to process it, and so forth. So frankly, the question isn't, does Sidney Powell have spelling errors on some of these things, or a bad spell checker, or whatever? Anyone who's dealt with a spell checker knows what that is. My only shock is that there would not have been more. But the fact that they're attacking it based on spelling errors rather than the content tells you what they think of the content. In other words, they do not want you talking about this content. But the most important thing, and I want to stress this, the most important thing that shows you that these guys are still scared came from a tweet by the good folks at 538. The Nate Silver, Mr. I am the most accurate pollster in the world. This is going to be a Biden landslide. There's no such thing as the shy Trump voter. Democrats are going to get plenty of seats. All of these things are going to break their way, Mr. Him. He tweeted this out. Polling betting markets still giving Trump a greater than 10% chance, both nationally and in several states where, quote, results have been certified. As I said before, it's a bit alarming. There are so many delusional people out there that the market equilibrium is this detached from reality. Well, let me tell you a couple about these things about this. And I tweeted back two things to him. First thing I tweeted back was the difference between those fellows in the betting markets and you are, if the odds makers get it wrong, they have to pay out too much and they're out of business. Nate Silver can get it wrong in the last election. He can get it wrong in this election. And he insists, no, I gave him a chance. I didn't get it wrong. And he's going to keep having a job because he's useful to the left. Now, I note that they give Biden an 88.7% chance of winning. And that's not unreasonable, given that the president's team has to both prove fraud and prove that it's a level enough to affect the election and cause the courts or the legislatures to impose a solution. And then that's not as easy as it sounds. And I want to point this out. If you are like me, a Trump supporter, you better be damn ready for the idea that this is an uphill climb. Anyone who tells you this is going to be easy is lying to you. This is not going to be easy, especially since you have all of the censorship to keep the regular people from seeing this. But I also sent a second tweet, and by the way, Gateway Pundit reports that Vegas bookies and London bookies, they still haven't paid out on this election. And if they haven't paid out, I haven't paid out myself either. I've assured the people I've bet with, I've put the money aside, the money is sitting, and if the Trump appeals fail, I'm going to pay out to the people. I've informed them all. Well, I've informed three of them. One person, I just can't find him. I'm presuming it was a troll or something who had just made the bet to troll me. But I can't find the fourth person. If the fourth person contacts me and if Biden still pulls this off, or I should say Trump doesn't pull this off, then rest assured you get your money. I've put this money aside. I don't welch on my bets. And no, I'm not going to be sensitive to the welch because I use that term. But the point is, I mean, again, the odds are still there. And I said back to Silver, it's amazing why you think folks had made sworn depositions under pain of perjury that they witnessed election fraud or something. Oh, but it can't be, or the media would be covering it. And surely Twitter would not censor sites with lawsuit filings or senators running hearings. And that's the other thing about this. The difference between what we saw from Giuliani and what we've seen from Sidney Powell and all the commentary that everybody's making is this. The Powell and Giuliani stuff all comes with sworn depositions made under pains of perjury. In other words, it's like the movie Class Action that in the courtroom scene where the man says, well, they says Professor so-and-so says this. So he says, and he says, so he says under oath. There's a great scene from the TV show, Yes, Prime Minister. And if you're looking for a Black Friday gift, if you got a political junkie in the family, get them the British shows, Yes, Minister and Yes, Prime Minister. They were made 35 years ago, and they are relevant now. I mean, they are literally relevant now in terms of what's been happening in the country. So it's some of the most brilliant political comedy that's ever been made. But there's one scene in an episode called A Victory for Democracy where the prime minister tells them, he's sending some troops to stop a communist invasion someplace. And he says, well, tell them that these troops were invited anyways. The NATO exercises delayed them, and now they're not needed. They're going. And there's a pause, and he says on the other end, well, of course. So nobody knows it's not true. Press statements aren't made under oath. All of the commentary you hear, all the tweets you're seeing on Twitter, all the things you're seeing on Gab, all of the stuff you are seeing on television And that includes Newsmax. Let's point it out. It includes Newsmax. It includes One American News, but CNN, ABC, NBC, Fox, all of these alphabet channels, all that you are seeing everywhere that is saying this is going to happen, that is going to happen. None of it means anything. The only thing that means something is what the courts say, and that includes both the state courts and the Supreme Court. And let me point out something else that's important. It's nice to get a win on the state level. Yes, this is going to be decided in the Supreme Court. Let's also be blunt. This is going to the Supreme Court. No matter who wins this fight, this is going to the Supreme Court. And someone is calling, and I have a really annoying phone message there. I really dislike that phone ringer. And it sounds like the phone is right underneath where the computer was. But I'm not going to worry about that because I don't know where it is, and I'm not going to pause the podcast to find it. Even though I can't abide a ringing phone. All my life, I have not been able to abide a ringing phone. Let's hope that whatever message is left is not anything too graphic. But as I was saying, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is what the courts say and what the legislatures do. And it's to the advantage of the Trump administration to win in court early. Because if you win in court early, then the proof of this decision is wrong goes in your favor versus this court was wrong, I want you to overturn them. It's always easier to support a decision already made than it is to overturn a decision already made. You always want judges tend to be more willing to do the former than the latter. Now, of course, we're talking the Supreme Court, we're talking Roberts, we're talking all of this stuff. So we don't know actually where that's going to go in the long run. We don't know for sure. And anyone who tells you they know for sure, they don't. All that matters is the evidence presented to the courts and the legislatures. And the reason why I say the legislatures matter so much is because even if the courts decide, you know what, I don't want to do this, like especially since the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democrat Party. When it comes down to it, the legislature has the right to appoint the electors. But the legislatures aren't going to do that unless they see sufficient evidence. Because, no one's going to just overturn an election unless there's cause to. There has to be cause, and I wouldn't want it either. I want the evidence to be damn good before I overturn an election. And let's face it, this is what, and that's how it's being sold. Let's be blunt. This election was stolen. I'm not stating this as anything other than a fact. The mere statistical evidence shows you that this election has been stolen. And there's a reason why you're not seeing any statistical experts out there saying, oh, this election is fair and fair. You're not seeing that. And there's a reason why. That must be a really important call if they're calling twice. I'm going to see if I can find that phone. It's my wife. Okay. Hold on 1 second because this is my wife. Hello, Valerie. I'm in the middle of the podcast and you're live. Do you have anything to say to the listeners? I don't have you on speaker. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, don't forget to call the furniture place if you haven't already. Take care. Bye. Okay. My wife was in Gardner picking up her paycheck or something. So, yeah, it's my wife. It's one of the tips for being married. When it's your wife, you answer the phone, even if it's a podcast. She says hi, apologizes for interrupting the podcast. But that's my wife. With all due respect to anybody who watches this podcast, you know what? I'm married to her, and I've been married to her for 32 years. I'm going to talk to her if I see her on the phone. I'm sorry. That's the way it is. She's more important to me than you. I confess. I confess. But anyways, I digress. So you're going to have to convince the state legislatures that there's enough evidence to overturn. what the governors are saying, what the press is saying, what's been sold to people. Because remember, a lot of people have not gotten the information. The Media Center has already reported that a lot of the stuff concerning Biden, people just hadn't heard about, and say that if we had known, they would have ruled differently. Of course, it doesn't really matter because, hey, if you're already stealing the election, what's stealing another million votes? So what's the difference? So let's see. We'll just submit it with those two tags because I don't have time for more. Again, I'm putting the podcast on Whatafinger and Citizen Free Press. Get a few more eyeballs. So we hope. So you got to convince these guys, and you're going to have to convince these guys in the face of intimidation, and some of it violent intimidation. So that's a high hurdle to cross. But the fact that they have reached the point where they're not just censoring D-list bloggers like me, the fact that they're bothering to censor D-list bloggers like me over benefits law is very bad for them. The fact that they're censoring Sidney Powell's site is very bad for them. But I'm not surprised that they're doing this, because if you're going to be in, you might as well be all in. And that's why nothing is surprising me anymore about this. If you are going to censor this stuff, if you are going to be all in to steal this election, you might as well be all in, because the penalties that's going to come from it are going to be the same. If President Trump wins this, Twitter's in big trouble. Facebook is in big trouble. Google is in big trouble, because he's a Jacksonian. He's going to make them pay. And frankly, he's going to make them pay even if he doesn't put it off. In fact, there are several reasons why, and I don't know if I'll say it in this podcast or in the next one, where they would have been better off with Trump in than with him out, because basically, to summarize it fast, he remains a threatened being, because he can still be reelected, a la Grover Cleveland, 2 non-consecutive terms. He still has power. He still has influence. And he can mobilize voters at any given point, at any given time. That is a disadvantage. That is an advantage that he can use if he chooses to. And he probably will choose to, because of the way he treats. And I want to stress something else. And I know I'm getting off the subject of the election a little. If the Democrats had treated Donald Trump as a normal president, they would have been fine. One of the biggest mistakes was treating Trump differently. So they were locked out of the gravy train for a couple of years. They would have been back in. They suspected that he would they either were too hungry for power or suspected he would do what he did. And it's an amazing, amazing thing that these guys haven't thought of that. Of course, this could be China ops and other things, because of, if you saw any of Giuliani's presentation yesterday on Thanksgiving, I played the entire 3.5 hours of the hearings in Pennsylvania. And another thing I should bring up, Twitter actually suspended the senator from Pennsylvania, the state senator who ran those hearings. We don't have an actual reason for it. They just suspended him outright. And again, I'm not surprised, because they are all in. They have to be all in. And all of these things are being done for one reason. If the Democrats and left really thought this case was bad, if they thought this case was weak, if they thought that this voter fraud did not happen, not a chance, they'd let it be talked about. They would point at it. They wouldn't believe it. And it's an amazing, amazing thing that they've gone so all in on. This can't be talked about. This must not be said. That gives it credibility, frankly. If they're censoring it to the point where they do not want people to see it, and what they don't want to see is the easy way that this is understanding. People this is something easy to understand. And because it's easy to understand, and I know I say this over and over again, that's why you have the censorship, because this is easy for the average person to understand. I'm sorry. I'm just shaking my head because less than 24 hours after the Supreme Court upheld religious freedom, the Pope put out an op-ed in the Times about freedom not being all that good. This is the worst Pope in my lifetime. This is the worst Pope in my lifetime. Now, this doesn't mean to say that he hasn't done a couple of good things. His stress on the existence of the devil is an excellent thing. His stress on mercy is an excellent thing. And he probably would make a good parish priest. He approaches being Pope as parish priest, but he doesn't approach being Pope as Pope. Francis is the best example of the St. Peter principle. Someone promoted above his level of function. He's turned the Peter principle into the St. Peter principle. He may be personally holy. And we, as Christianity teaches us, we should not judge the state of someone else's soul. I have enough of my own sins that I'm worrying about, and I want the mercy of God. And I need the mercy of God just as much as anybody else. But boy, there has not been a worse Pope in my lifetime in terms of just doing the job. Amazing. But again, back to all of this election stuff. It's very easy to understand. And Doug Ross of Doug Ross Journal has made it even more easy to understand. And there is a wonderful, absolutely wonderful infographic that he has on his site that I'm putting in chat right now for those of you who want to see it. Doug Ross infographic. The Doug Ross infographic, if you want people to understand what's happened, this is great. And we're going to go through it right now. And again, he labels it so easy to consume, even Democrats can understand. And that's the reason. Overview of fraud allegations. Let's go over them a little bit. Illegal procedures. Number one, no chain of custody for machines and large bundles of ballots. In other words, you do not see, it's like doing a magic trick and putting down the curtain, 30 seconds later, putting up the curtain. Oh, this suddenly appeared. This wasn't on the table before. 30 seconds later, you open up. It's now there. Poll watchers removed and threatened. Again, and all remember, this happens for a reason. You do not remove poll watchers because you're being honest. An unprecedented voting pauses. Again, you do not pause to see how many votes you need unless there's a reason for it. Second point, insecure voting machines. Design permits operators to easily move votes between candidates. Audit logs, incomplete and insecure. You do not have audit logs that are not there without a reason. Linked to foreign governments because, we do not want to be unfair to our foreign friends. After all, why should they not be able to affect our elections? And then illegal ballots. No signature verification. It's a piece of paper. No barcoding or ballot verification. One of the interesting things is when they were doing mail ballots in Pennsylvania, the state senator who was suspended by Twitter during his hearing talked about when the governor wanted to push mail ballots, I was going to push for a barcode so each one could be verified. Makes perfect sense. The governor announced you put in that barcode, instant veto of his securities. Think about that. If you allow us to make sure these ballots are the real thing, we will veto this. This happens for a reason. Statistically implausible dumps of votes late in the process, 95% for Biden. Again, this is the Benford's Law stuff that I've talked about and that I keep getting locked out of Twitter for, and that I'll probably get locked out of Twitter. I'm figuring Monday, because what I'm going to do is I'll tweet it out before I go to work. They'll lock me up for 12 hours. I'll be gone for 12 hours anyway, so who gives a damn? And then I'll make my appeal when I get home from work, and then we'll see how many days it takes them to put me back in. I presume they'll eventually just suspend me, because I don't know if I have a legal recourse against them. But I'm saving all this stuff. I'm building a chain of evidence of what they're doing, which is why I keep doing this. Okay, illegal procedures, broken chain of custody for voting machines. And again, this is all in illustrations. Quote, we typically receive the machines, the ballot marking devices on Friday before the election with a chain of custody letter to be signed on Sunday, indicating that we'd received the machines and the counts on the machines when received and that the machines had been sealed. In this case, we were asked to sign the chain of custody letter on Sunday, even though the machines were not delivered until 2 a.m. the morning of Election Day. This is unacceptable, and voting machines should not be out of custody prior to Election Day. Illegal procedures. Democrat majority counties illegally prevented Republican poll watchers from monitoring the vote counting activities. Quote, Democrat majority counties provided political parties and candidates, including the Trump campaign, no meaningful access or actual opportunity to review and assess the validity of mail-in ballots. During the pre-canvassing meetings, while in the audit or recount, they witnessed Trump votes being put into Biden piles. Witnesses testify, and again, witnesses testify under oath, quote, there were no meaningful way to review or audit any activity, and there was no way to tell if any counting was accurate or if activity was proper. Again, illegal proceedings. Large batches of pristine identical ballots, and this is why paper ballots are a great security measure. Quote, a large number of ballots were identical and likely fraudulent. Affidavit, which means a person who signed an affidavit, observed a batch of utterly pristine ballots. These different ballots included a slight depressed pre-fold so they could be easily folded and unfolded for use in the scanning machines. There were no markings on the ballots to show where they had come from or where they had been processed. These stood out. In my 20 years of experience in handling ballots, I observed that the markings for the candidates on these ballots were unusually uniform, perhaps even with a ballot marking device. By my estimate, in observing these ballots, approximately 98% constituted votes for Joe Biden. I only observed 2 of these ballots as votes for President Donald Trump. And again, think about people handling things. Think about both a mail-in ballot and a ballot at a polling place. People are not the same. People mark things differently. People handle things differently. Things get folded. Things get crunkled. Things get marked off a little bit. If you have absolutely positively pristine ballots, untouched, then they probably were untouched by voters. Now, insecure voting machines. 96,600 mail-in ballots were illegally counted as they were not cast by legal voters. Quote, Russell Ramsland confirms the data breaches in the Dominican software permitted voter actors to penetrate and manipulate the software during the recent general election. He further concludes that at least 96,600 mail-in ballots were illegally counted as they were not cast by legal voters. Expert Navid, I can't pronounce the name, but it's Kazhavaris Nia, states that Dominion software is vulnerable to data manipulation by unauthorized means and permitted election data to be altered in all battleground states. He concludes that, quote, hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast for President Trump in the 2020 general election were transferred to Vice President Biden. And I want to mention something. These type of concerns were all things that the mainstream media were concerned about before the election. Before the election, you still had people talking about these things. For example, Barack Obama once told Chris Matthews during the 2008 election, mail-in ballots can only be trusted if the signatures were verified. Apparently, he does not believe that anymore. USA Today published on November 2nd, the last day you could raise these questions without being called a conspiracy theorist. Will your ballot be safe? Computer experts sound warnings on American voting machines. Quote, millions of votes going into polls Tuesday will cast their ballots on machines blasted as unreliable and inaccurate for 2 decades by computer scientists from Princeton University to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Now, again, the quote, if you say this now, you're a conspiracy theorist. All of these, and there were actually many examples of Democrats in the left talking about this and worried about election security. And they were very, very worried about it until they stole this election. Now, all of these things that they talked about, all of these things that they claimed were threats, are no longer threats. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens when this busts out. And we have a line from chat. The mainstream from MJB, the media needs to prepare for people for what they know is coming. It seems they're all complicit in this for what's to come. And that's very dangerous. And I cannot say this enough times. It is a very, very bad idea to convince a bunch of people who have been arming themselves to the teeth for years that there's absolutely no reason for them to participate in the democratic process. It's a very, very, very bad idea to do that. And it's a dangerous idea. And the people it's dangerous to are people like the media who have been pushing this stuff. It's dangerous, and it'll be dangerous to Antifa. I was talking with a fellow, one of the guys I had my bets with, and he thinks this is all going to end in violence, and he's very, very much probably right. And now I want to point out something else, and this was mentioned in the hearings. I'm going to jump away from the Doug Ross stuff for a second. You can see the whole Doug Ross thing at the thing I pointed out. The Republicans have won so many of these swing seats, and there's all these mail-in ballots. Now, if you are going on an election day, and let's point this out. If it's election day and you're voting in person, let's say you've waited in a long line for 2 hours. You are less likely, yes, I haven't eaten today. I often forget to eat. You wouldn't know it by my shape. If you've been in line for 2 hours, maybe you don't give a care and you just vote for president. Although I think that's kind of ridiculous because it's a ballot. I mean, it doesn't take more than a few seconds to mark out your state rep. Doesn't take more than a few seconds to mark out your member of Congress or your senator. And the ballot. I mean, maybe you skip the ballot questions. You probably haven't even read them. I read them, but beside the point. If you're doing a mail-in ballot, you have all the time in the world. You got a bunch of these mail-in ballots, hundreds of thousands of them. The only choice is for president. The only thing about that, the people who had the most time to decide, you know what? I'm a Democrat. I want my Democrat congressperson to win. I want my Democrat senator to win. Didn't bother to fill out those ovals. And they expect us to believe this. Well, the thing is, they do expect people to believe that there's something funny with it out, which is why they're censoring it. Now, insecure voting machines. The Dominion system undermines the reconciliation of the number of votes and the number of ballots cast, opening the door to ballot stuffing and fraud. The collapse of reconciliation was seen in Georgia's primary and runoff elections this year, and the November election, where it was discovered that during the hand audit, that 3,300 votes were found on memory sticks that were not uploaded on election light. Plus, in Floyd County, another 2,600 absentee ballots had been scanned. These found votes reduced Biden's lead over Trump. In Floyd County, 3,300 votes found on a memory stick that had never been counted. It's unclear how many other times this occurred. Quote, the design and features of the Dominion software do not permit a simple audit to reveal its misallocation, redistribution, or deletion of votes. First, the system's central accumulator does not include a protected real-time audit log that maintains the date and timestamps of all significant election events. This allows an unauthorized user the opportunity to arbitrarily add, modify, or remove log entries. And let me give you a comparison between these voting systems and where I work. If I am picking an item, let's say you ordered a pair of ripped pants, and don't get me going on the fact that people are buying pants pre-ripped and paying $30 to $50 for it. That I could do a whole podcast on that. But let's say you buy a pair of pants. The order comes in. The computer registers this order. This order is unpicked. It's assigned to be picked. It will go possibly to a robot, possibly just into the system. At where I work, either you will follow the robot and, okay, the robot says this is where these size pants, because you have a color, you have a size, you have whatever. Robot goes to the location where the pants are. Pick it, put it in the robot container. Or you have your iPod or whatever, and it says, all right, go to this location, get the pants. So you go to the location, get the pants. You scan the pants to see, all right, this is the right pants because there's a barcode. Different barcode, different size, different model, different whatever. The robot scans it. Yep, scans the barcode. That's the right barcode. Goes into the order bin or whatever the order container you have. That order goes to the shipper. The shipper now scans the order. Okay, this is the order going to Peter and Jemmy, who would not be buying ripped pants, by the way. It says, all right, item 77338, ripped pants because we don't believe in pants that aren't ripped. You scan it. It comes up on the computer screen. You scan it. And remember, the person picking the item is logged on to the iPod. The person picking the thing onto the robot is logged on unless they're just so busy that they don't bother having them log on, which, again, it's a security issue in terms of we don't know who put it in there, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. So it goes in. The order is sent out. Scanned, processed, labeled, sent out. Ordered on Black Friday, you get it whenever you get it, depending on the type of order you bought. Now, if you go into that computer system where I work, because I've had to do that on occasion, you will say, okay, here's the name of the person who ordered it. This is the time the order went in. This is the location. This is who picked this and what location it came from. This is who shipped this and what time they shipped it. There is a line of possession that show, okay, this is where it is. This is where it is. This is where it is. This is where it came from. And that's for buying a friggin' pair of pants. You're not going to do that with voting. If you don't do that with voting machines and voting software, that's deliberate. That's deliberate. Illegal ballots. Democrat majority counties performed virtually no signature verification, allowing massive illegal vote dumps for Biden. Quote, in Georgia, the signature verification requirement is a dead letter. The signature rejection rate for most recent election announced by the Secretary of State was 0.15%. The signature rejection rate for absentee ballot applications was 0.00167%. Only 30 statewide. Think about that. In an election where millions of people voted, only 30 ballots were thrown out because of signature verification. Hancock County, Georgia, population 8,348, rejected 9 absentee ballot applications for signature mismatch. Fulton County rejected 8. No other metropolitan county in Georgia rejected even a single absentee ballot application for signature mismatch. Think about that for a second. Illegal ballots. Hundreds of witnesses observed illegal handling of ballots, even restricted access to view counting. Quote, I witnessed 2 poll workers removing allegedly separated paper machine receipt ballots with barcodes in the Trump tray, placing them into the Biden tray. I also witnessed the same 2 poll workers putting the already separated paper ballots in the no vote and the Jorgensen tray, removing them and putting them inside the Biden tray. They took out all the ballots from the Biden tray and stacked them on the table, writing the count ballot sheet. So the summary: illegal procedures, illegal voting machines, illegal ballots. Plaintiffs have no adequate remedy at law and will suffer serious and irreparable harm unless their injunctive relief herein is granted. Defendants have added that, unless enjoined, will act under the color of state law to violate the election clauses of the Constitution. Accordingly, the results for President and Congress in the November 3rd, 2020 election must be set aside. They are infected with constitutional violations. That is the summary at Doug Ross Journal and should be tweeted out to everyone. Everyone should be shared everywhere because it's easy to understand. And again, this is why the censorship, not because it's hard to understand, but because it's easy to understand. And the easier it is to understand, the more dangerous it is to the left. Remember, this stuff gets done for a reason. You do not do any of these things unless you're trying to hide something. This is common sense, and people understand this. People know this. The question is, do people want to remain ignorant? And as I've said, there are consequences for this. The biggest consequence, in my opinion, is if you let them get away with this, they will do it forever. Think of the throwing of the World Series in 1919. As I've mentioned before, the ringleader of this was brought before the American League and charged with tampering with games. And they let him off. And that had a freeing effect on him. I mean, I'm telling you right now, this is very bad for these guys. They understand it. I mean, right now, over 50 million Americans believe this election was stolen, and 30% of Democrats do it. I mean, again, like I said, there's a reason why you're not seeing statistical people arguing on the left. They're caught between, if I say this is straight, I'm a joke as a mathematician, and if I say this is crooked, my university will fire me and I'll be protested by Antifa. Now, there's a side effect here, and there's a couple of side effects of not fighting this. But there's side effects for Republicans, too. And one of the side effects, and I want to quote Donald Trump Jr. here, I'm seeing a lot of talk from people that are supposed to be on our side telling GOP voters not to go out and vote for Kelly Loeffler and Perdue. This is nonsense. We need everyone coming out to vote for them. And let's face it, if Democrats can openly steal a presidential election in Georgia without the governor, AG, or legislator acting to stop them, why would conservative Georgians who decide it's worth bothering to show up? That's why the state legislatures have to act. But let's go a little further. Why should they turn out? First of all, if the election is being stolen from conservative voters, and you're a member of the state legislature or the state senate, why would I bother turning up to vote for you if you voted to let the steal take place? More importantly, why would I not support a primary challenger to you? Why would President Trump not bother to support a primary challenger to you? I mean, frankly, a lot of these guys only care about their own power. And unless they see a threat to their electoral points, the old saying that Lyndon Johnson used to say, when you've got them by their balls, their hearts and minds will follow. And that's really true. Republicans do not understand that they are risking their own seats. I mean, we talked about there's no carrot for the Democrats if you let them get away with this. But if you let's go through this. Let's say you're a GOP governor or senator or ex-cabinet official who would like to run for president in 2024 or beyond, who chooses to oppose President Trump's fight to stop the theft. What incentive does the president or his supporters have to turn out for you in the primaries or donate to your cause? There's none. Let's say you are the GOP nominee for president in 2024-28, a nominee not named Donald Trump, and you urged President Trump to concede and or insisted that election 2020 was not tainted by fraud. What incentive do Republican voters have to turn out for you or to donate to you if they believe the fix is already in? Let's say you are a GOP governor or senator or congressman who is running for re-election in 2020, and you choose to oppose President Trump's fight to stop the theft of election 2020. What incentive does the president or supporters have to eschew supporting a primary challenger and to hold rallies for a primary challenger running against you? Let's say you're a member of the GOP of the state legislature in Georgia or Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, who's decided against pushing back against the corrupt election system in your state. What incentive does the president or his supporters have to eschew supporting a primary challenger or hold rallies for that primary challenger? Let's say you are a member of the state legislature in Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Michigan, and your state Supreme Court rejects compelling evidence of voter fraud and sworn affidavits of the day presented by Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, or Rudy Giuliani, and you choose not to vote for an alternate set of electors. What incentive does a potential primary opponent have to stay away when they can raise money nationally, mind you? Remember, your primary opponent will be able to raise money nationally from angry supporters of President Trump and maybe even get a visit or rally from said president in your race. Finally, let's say you're a GOP official or poll who decides to leave government after opposing President Trump's attempt to stop the steal of election 2020. What incentive is there for any think tank or conservative group to hire you when having you on their staff could adversely affect their fundraising, or credibility among the party base? None. Put simply, you will crash as fast as Fox News has. As I've said before, the people in most danger right now, the most physical danger, are not the people who have sworn under oath, not the people who have testified, but the people who know this has been stolen and have kept their mouth shut. Because they're the witnesses. They're the witnesses who are going to have to be eliminated before they talk. The people who've already talked have too much scrutiny under them. People who haven't talked yet are the ones in danger. And I'm telling you right now, if you're a senator, if you're a congressman on the state or federal level, and you are a Republican, you go along with this, I'm telling you right now. I mean, maybe the Soros people will find a better job for you. Maybe they'll pay you off. But forget about politics. You're done, at least as far as being a Republican. And here's an article, by the way, from the Washington Examiner by Paul Bedard. An analysis of Nevada votes have uncovered an unprecedented jump in problem voter registrations, likely providing the Trump campaign with another avenue to challenge Joe Biden's electoral victory in the state. Now, number of 2020 voters in Nevada CD3 whose voter registration lists invalid birthdays, no birthday, no birth month, and unknown sex by year of registration. 2017, there were none. 2008, 1. 2010, 1. 2011, 1. 2013, 1. 2014, 1. 2015, 3. 2016, 68. 2017, 28. 2018, 156, which is a big jump. 2019, 317, 73. That's a lot. 2020, 13,372. And of those 13,372 voter registration lists, which had invalid birthdays and birth months, an unknown sex, 74% of them took place between July and September. 74%. Let's be blunt. This election has been stolen. The only question that's left is anybody going to do anything about it? And remember, Dominion passed on a hearing that they were scheduled to testify at. You don't run away and lawyer up when you have nothing to hide. And remember, that's the difference between testifying under oath and just saying something. Now, people are going to just have to decide if they want a republic or not. That's what the bottom line is. They're going to have to decide it. And if this was back when I was 10 years old, it'd be a no-brainer because the World War II generation would not put up with this. World War II generation is mostly dead now. And the baby boom generation, which is the worst generation that this country has ever produced, the 60s generation, they're cowards. And I want to stress something else, and this is concerning the COVID regulations and so forth, because I want to talk briefly about the Supreme Court thing. You've lived in freedom all your lives. Do you want to live without freedom? I mean, right now we have the 5-4 Supreme Court ruling concerning religious freedom. The fact that it was 5-4 is really disgusting to me. That it's not 6-3, 7-2, but the left doesn't vote. The left votes in lockstep, and Justice Roberts is owned by these guys. I don't know what they have on him, but they must have something on him. But what's the point of living, of saying, oh, we can't go out, we can't do these things for risking to life, if you're not allowed to live? Remember how we had all these assisted suicide things, and they talked about quality of life, quality of life. What quality of life are you allowing yourself? The same people who are arguing for assisted suicide, claiming quality of life, are insisting that people stay locked in and not go anywhere, not see anyone, not do anything. Funny how that argument kind of disappeared, isn't it? Well, I want to briefly mention that the Supreme Court told Mario Cuomo to pound sand by a 5-4 margin. And not surprisingly, Cuomo said, "Oh, this is no big deal. The court's ruling doesn't mean anything." Imagine if, after the gay marriage ruling, if a state said, "We're not obeying it." Imagine the outrage. No outrage from the left, unexpectedly, of course. Also, I want to mention very briefly that yesterday was Thanksgiving. Not a lot of football. One of the NFL games was canceled because of a COVID scare and moved to Sunday. But during the Detroit Lions game, apparently the quarterback for the Lions and Houston both kneeled. And lots of people shut off their TVs. And I got to tell you something right now. This is a very bad thing if you're an NFL guy. If you don't want your customers, you don't have to have them. Because these guys are going to, once they see what it's going to do to the salary caps, it will be interesting to see how many of them decide to go along with this garbage. Well, we've gone on for almost an hour, and I still have to work today, and there's things I have to do. So I want to close with a little bit of a little Black Friday story. I was up just after midnight. I watched a movie with my wife, The Kid from Brooklyn, starring Danny Kaye and Virginia Mayo, and a dancer whose name I'm having a brain fart on. Incredible dancer. I mean, you have to see this woman. Movie is from 1946, and great movie. Vera Ellen is the name. Incredible dancer. You've never seen this woman can really dance. So before I went to bed, I checked out Amazon. I said, you know what? I'm going to take a look at my lists that my wife and my kids had for things that they wanted for Christmas, and see if any of the things they want are on the Black Friday list for sales. None. Then before the podcast, I said, I don't have a lot of time, but I do want to look at the Black Friday deals. I looked through 25 pages of Black Friday deals. There wasn't a single thing on it that I needed or wanted. Now, part of it's being older. You don't need as much garbage. But I think it's very interesting that I've recognized a lot of the things on special as the things that they've pushed in the past. And a lot of the specials that you're running into basically you're being sold. And people who follow this stuff understand this. But there are a lot of people who don't. And it's sort of like with the election. The people who have followed these things know what's going on. Both sides know that this has been stolen. Democrats are counting on the Republicans laying down because they've laid down in the past. And this brings up an important point. When the gangs first came to my town, my city is known as a place where there's a lot of drug traffic. Just across the bridge from where my home is, the state police basically have houses there now. And they patrol that area because it's a very high drug distribution area. This was not always so. When the gangs first came in, the city didn't crack down because people were afraid of being called racist. And the gangs became established, and Fitchburg became a drug area. And now we have the state police patrolling down the road from me in what used to be the safest neighborhood in the city. And of course, in fairness, it was the safest neighborhood because it was the Sicilian neighborhood. And you did not make trouble in a Sicilian neighborhood or you would not be safe. But I was the last Sicilian to move into the old Sicilian neighborhood. But once you let the gangs get established, once you let this stuff go on, it stops, and then you have to root it out really bad. Like I've let the house get a little dirty because I've been working a lot of hours. My wife works a lot of hours. And when my son moves out, we're going to clean it. It's going to take time. But it's always harder to clean things up when you let them go. If we let this go, this is going to be very hard to clean up. And I suspect it's going to end in guns. What I think is going to happen, hope it doesn't go to this point. What I think is going to happen is the case is going to be made. The legislators are going to have to decide what they want to do. Antifa will turn out to try and intimidate the legislatures. And non-Antifa people who don't want their election stolen will turn out, and they'll be armed. That's where the bloodshed is going to come from. I hope it doesn't happen. But I also hope that we don't let this go, because if we let this go now, sooner or later the fight will come, and it's going to be bloodier. If this is going to be taken care of, if this is going to be stopped, it has to be stopped now. This is right out in the open. They're not doing, the media is doing their best to hide it. The social media is doing their best to hide it. This is all right out in the open. If they can steal this blatantly now, they're going to steal it a lot more blatantly later, and your republic's gone. Now, if you're the left and you're not having children all that much, it may not mean anything to you. It means something to me. America, you got to make up your mind. Do you want to be America or not? Because if you don't, you're going to find out that the freedoms that you have are not organic. They don't automatically come. And they're just one step away from being gone. And once they're gone, you're going to wonder where they were, just like you will wonder about the days when you used to be able to go to your local restaurant without a mask. You take care. Have a great Christmas season. May God bless you. And go say a mass for the country. Pray for the people who are trying to stop the steal. And pray for the people who are stealing it too, because they're children of God as well. You take care. We'll see you next week. I don't know. I think I'm going in early next week. I believe next Friday I'm going in at 1:30. So we'll either have the podcast at 10 or I might give it a miss altogether. I'll let you know during the week. Oh, and until then, one other thing. You've probably noticed a few more sponsored posts on my site. They help pay the bills. Remember, I'm doing this podcast to increase traffic and to get an extra $180 a month. If it doesn't come from the tip jar, it's going to have to come from somewhere. And that's where it's coming from. All right. Take care. Have a great one. And a Merry Christmas season to you and all of yours. Bye-bye.